I don't know, when people get around, I get nervous and shit.
I hear you, man. Well, the pressure's on. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's a
because you're
different
like,
kind of thing.
It's a show. It's live. You know what I mean?
So
Totally.
I'm very gracious with people because I know how shit can be.
Yeah, totally, man. Totally. Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Bottom of the Bill. We got Ulysses Owens Jr. on the podcast today. Thanks for being here, man.
Glad to be here, man.
Yeah,
Thanks for coming.
With both of you all.
Absolutely, man. So Ulysses, for those who don't know, is an author, drummer, band leader, educator, producer, and the list keeps going on. You can hear, human being, yeah. You can hear his performances on Grammy Award-winning albums such as Kurt Elling's live album "Dedicated to You" and Christian McBride Big Band's "The Good Feeling." He's the artistic director for the nonprofit organization Don't Miss a Beat, Inc., a foundation created by his family to help empower the youth to dream big using art, music, and civic engagement programming. He's published several articles and books. His latest career guide to musicians turning your talent into sustained success is available now. Currently, you can catch him playing with Generation Y, Ulysses Owens Jr. Big Band, and teaching at Julliard School as well. So that's the longest intro I've ever had to do.
Yeah.
Too long for
Can
me.
you believe he just finished his first Harvey Boys detective book yesterday, too? I can't believe how good you're getting at reading.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate that. I've been working a little hard at it. Thanks you so much for being here, man.
Glad to be here, man.
This is awesome.
Okay.
Where do you find the time?
People ask me that, and it's funny because so I admittedly have, or I've self-diagnosed myself with ADD. I'm one of those people that I have to always be doing something, and so people look at my resume or look at things and they're like, "How do you find the time?" And for me, I feel like I have a lot of time, but I also think it's because I don't commit to a lot of things as well. So I'm very careful about what I commit to, so that I have that open, space. I also have a 5-month-old baby boy.
Oh, congratulations.
So thank you. So and kudos to his mom. We both co-parent, so he spends the majority of his time, with her, and I get in there and spend time with him as well. But I would say, like, I have a lot of people in my life that help me, and I have a team that really, like, allows me to not have to be bombarded. Like, so if it was a person who tried to do all those things but with no help, I'd probably be spinning on my head. I probably wouldn't be able to do this. But I think because I'm really adamant about building relationships with people that can help me maintain the things that matter, and so it makes things easier for me.
Totally, man. So there's a lot of stuff that we can cover. Obviously, you have a huge resume, but I want to really focus on the entrepreneurial side because I think that's a side that at least I'm particularly drawn to.
Great.
So, but before we do that, when did you start playing?
2 years old. Actually, not far from here. There's a church on Kings Road in Jacksonville, Florida. Should I just connect with you?
Oh,
okay, great.
Or Billy
when I see a bunch of cameras, I'm like, where do I look?
Don't even ignore that shit.
But anyway, so there's a church in Kings Road, Jacksonville. It was called Still in Blue Church of God. And I come from a very religious family full of pastors and, all that. And I start playing there. My mom's a choir director. And I'm told, I always tell the story that the drummer got up one day at choir rehearsal because she sat me next to him. And when he got up, I, like, hopped on and I started playing, like, in time. So I always say,
two?
Yeah.
That's wild.
And what's funny, people are like, yeah, right. I actually have pictures of it, of me like doing that, And then my aunt Dorothy bought, I guess the cartoon at that time was Biscuitats, and so they bought me a drum set with that, like, logo or whatever. And so there's literally pictures of me, like, drool coming down, like
That's hilarious.
So it's funny, like, when I think now about, my son, because I'm like, oh, that means in like a year and a half I might potentially have a drummer. But yeah, it's funny. I mean, I don't know life without drums. I don't know life without music. So I love it that way.
Yeah, man. And what drew you to jazz?
Man, so I heard Buddy Rich for the first time. My parents, so this is I feel like when I tell these stories, like, this is pre-YouTube, this is pre-internet, all of that. And there was a music company called DCI Videos, which was now, or I think sold to a company called Hudson Music, which is out there. And anyway, they used to sell videotapes at your local music store. And my parents, for Christmas, bought a Buddy Rich one. And I saw Buddy play, and for anybody who's ever seen Buddy play, it's like a work of art, and that kind of bit me with the jazz bug. But he's not like a traditional jazz drummer.
Right.
Then I would say I heard Miles Davis at 16, and that was when it was pretty much like, that's what I want to be. And I met Wynter Marsalis. He came to Fernandina Beach High School, and he was doing a lot of touring in the South because a lot of his band was from down here. So anyway, I got a chance to go there, and I saw him, and I just who he was, how he operated, how he moved around in the world. I was like, I want to be that. So I think that's when not just falling in love with the art form, but then like wanting to be sort of the personality of it meant a lot to me. It was like it sort of was a clear sign of that's what I felt I needed to do.
Oh, that's awesome, man. And so you grew up in Jacksonville then?
Jacksonville, west side of town, Normandy Boulevard, to be more specific, like not far from Hurlong Airport. This is back when there was there's a bunch of neighborhoods there now, which we were just talking about, how Jacksonville's changing, but it was a very different city then. It was very much military based. So much of the transplants that were here were either here for Cecil Field, NAS Jax, or Mayport. And you had people that were from here, but it wasn't like now where you've got I'm sure most of you all know people who are here for a job or for like some new opportunity or Amazon. Jacksonville was just a big city with a lot of land. It didn't have as much going on there.
Right. And what was it like coming up in a scene like that?
I mean, what's interesting is we have one of the most talented, I think, jazz scenes in the world. We were just talking earlier about Barry Green. The University of North Florida, to me, really contributed to us having a great jazz scene. I grew up with great players who, God rest their soul, like Barlow, who I got to see, because right up the street from here in Avondale, there's a restaurant called The Brick.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Brick used to be a place called Partners. Partners was this cool restaurant, and way in the back, which is where they seat people now, used to be a stage. And that was one of the best jam sessions in town, used to be there. And then there used to be a spot, I think on Hendricks, called Juice and Java, which was like a juice shop. And at night, it was like a tea sort of, I think maybe they served wine. I wouldn't know, I was a kid. But they used to have jam sessions. And again, when the jazz festival would come in, you'd have all these great artists from all over the world sitting in there. So I kind of knew around 12 or 13 about those scenes. So it was great. And then you had like people like Teddy Washington, who had spent many years with James Brown, lived here. You also had great jazz players like that passed through, from what I understand. You had Longinu Parsons, who's an incredible resource, who his son, for those that may not know, is Longinu Jr., who's the drummer for Yellow Card. We had my man with Limp Bizkit.
I can't remember his name right now.
Fred Durst?
No,
but they all are from Jacksonville.
No, I know.
But I can't think of the drum. I have his drumstick too.
Is he a jazz drummer?
He went to DA. He went to my high school.
That's
There's
hilarious.
no way.
That band formed at DA.
Well, I believe that, but John Otto.
John
Otto, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, John. That's what But yeah, so DA. So UNF was great for jazz, but DA was amazing because you had this legacy of these kind of people. Like, I mean, two of the most famous rock bands, Limp Bizkit and Yellow Card, formed in Jacksonville.
Right.
Which is an extension of the sort of like Leonard Skinner, whatever. But anyway, there was a lot of great music here. And I think it's also because you had the influence of like the church and a lot of people coming out of that and then playing jazz. So.
Totally. I feel that's like my favorite combination of drummer. There's like the gospel guys that like left the church and like started playing jazz.
Yeah.
Like to me, that's like Dorico Watson. Are you familiar?
I know Dorico very well. Yeah.
That I saw him play with Victor Wooten and Steve Bailey down in Miami when I was living there at UM.
Yeah.
And holy shit, man! I got to like a 5-minute drum solo in 5.
Yeah.
And it was the most musical drum solo.
Dorico's a beast, man. He and I need to hit him up. He and I used to talk a lot before, probably like when I was in New York, because he and I both were endorsing some more company, and like we were really close. He's a bad cat. I think he's in Nashville now.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah. What prompted the move to New York for you?
So Julliard, man. So I knew at 16, it was all this like series of events. 16, I heard Miles Davis because I wanted to go to Manhattan School of Music. I had a cousin that was there in New York, Wallace, and something about going to New York in the 90s. You could just feel the energy. I mean, it was amazing, man. Like I visited. You had Music Row at that time, which doesn't exist in Times Square, where it was literally 48th Street was a row of music stores. The whole block.
Oh yeah.
Also, so one side was music stores, the other side was studios. So have y'all seen the recent Kanye documentary?
Yeah, it's a great documentary.
So the first episode, I think when he was doing stuff with Jay-Z, he was at a studio called Right Track. That's on that street.
Okay.
And it's so cool when he walks out. You'll see he's standing in front of Sam Ash.
Okay.
So anyway, so New York was really cool during that time because I just felt like it was kind of the tail end of like all that like 70s, 80s, 90s New York, where the music scene, Hit Factory, all that was still there. So I knew I wanted to move there. I go to Manhattan School of Music at 16 to meet John Riley, who's a great jazz drummer, to see if I like have what it takes. And he was honest. He said, "Man, you're really talented." He said, "But you sound like a gospel drummer." He said, "And if you want to get into my program, you need to sound like a jazz drummer." So I was like, "Well, what do I do?" And he's like, "Well, dude, you got to check out the record." So I bought from Borders Music Store, when you could buy CDs from stores, bought that CD, Milestones. And that was when everything changed for me. And at that point, so I spent the next 2 years like playing with everybody I could in Jacksonville. That's why I really have such respect for the scene here. And guys like Claude Bass, Stan Piper,
Oh man.
Kevin Bales, Eric Ream, they were all like young and hungry college students. So they would hire me, and I would work with them. So I spent 2 years really doing that. And then Julliard, I found out that they had a jazz program they were going to launch right when I graduated high school. So I went from wanting to go to MSM to Julliard. And fast forward, I got accepted to that program. And that was what got me to New York. And then 3 weeks after moving to New York, September 11th happened.
Oh man.
So I
Damn,
like,
dude.
yeah, bro. So literally, I felt like, there's that movie Independence Day.
Yeah.
I literally felt like it was a scene in that movie. Like I was in the middle of all of that. So I thought like, wow, like I get this great blessing. I moved to New York. I'm at the Julliard School. I'm this kid from the South, like humble beginnings, and now I'm in New York City. And 3 weeks later, the world ends, or
man.
feels like it. But to everything, man, there's a reason and season, and it was cool. Like it all worked out, and actually, New York came together.
Yeah.
That's true.
That jazz clubs reduced their prices especially for students. So I got to hear all these legends for like $10 because they were just trying to keep the clubs going and getting people back into their thing. And then there were some jazz musicians that were still alive. So like Max Roach was still alive.
That's awesome.
Elvin Jones, Roy Haynes was still alive. So I got to see a lot of people that now I look back, having been in New York for over 20 years, and I'm like, that was a really special time because a lot of those people, particularly after COVID, a lot of those people are gone.
Yeah, totally.
And then I'll just say lastly, I knew that New York was where I wanted to be because the best musicians in the world were there.
Is that what is it? Was it ever like a toss up for you, like to go out to LA at all, or did you?
Not for me, because when I made that sort of exodus from gospel and knew I wanted to be jazz, for me, New York was the only place.
Right.
Because like LA has a jazz scene and it's great, but it's very small. I could list like people, on two hands, like who are there and who have lived there for 30 years, and they are like the kings of that castle.
Right.
But LA is more commercial, and especially now it's more like pop.
Yeah.
And it's a great town, and I have a lot of connections there. But every time I go to LA, it's very project driven.
Yeah.
It's like I'm there for a week, I'm doing something like real high profile, and then I'm gone. But also I don't like LA. Like I don't enjoy it because it feels like I always say if I'm gonna live in LA, I'd rather live here.
It's very spread out.
Yeah, it's like because at least in Jacksonville it's spread out, but like I have my family here. LA, you move there, and you've got to like be in a car for 2 hours to like get to all the things you want to do.
Traffic sucks there.
Yeah,
It's the worst.
So, but LA is cool. I enjoy it, and Europe is cool. If there was an alternative, I would have probably moved to Europe.
Is there an alternative scene like that? Do you think there's like a scene in Europe that that kind of rivals New York in a way?
Nobody rivals New York, but it's definitely you can make a living. Like for instance, I would probably move to France or like Germany, because the thing about in Europe, when you're there, they take care of you.
Mm-hmm.
So like a lot of my friends who are Americans who move there, they get like this, I can't give you the French name, I don't know how to pronounce it, but there's this status where if you are a musician, no matter whether you are working steadily or not, you get grafted into their system, which gives you health benefits. For whatever reason you can't work, you get an apartment. The taxes are high, but they really take care of you.
Right.
I don't see like broke down jazz musicians in other countries.
Right.
You only see it here because we don't really have a system together economically to really, not just jazz musicians, to really take care of any artist. And
Wait,
we
we-
saw that during the pandemic.
Yeah, we don't care about artists at all in this country. It's like they're defunding it from schools, and it's
Right,
like all
right.
these things. Like people, it's a whole different.
Yeah, I mean,
topic, but-
that's a whole other podcast.
Yeah.
Do they even have music programs in schools anymore? It's been so
Oh,
long.
yeah.
And like,
I'm-
in like public schools and everything?
Yeah, I mean, it's
I mean,
now.
like probably like they have band, but
Yeah, well, what's happening now is magnet programs.
oh,
So it's
okay.
either like magnet programs or like private schools, or like a school that has, like there's a school, MLK, Martin Luther King Jr. Elementary School. They have a great program, but they're tied into like a magnet feeder system.
Okay.
So I think now for if a kid wants like a access, they either got to be in private school or go to like a very accelerated or like art centric school program. I mean I'm in that world every day. I mean that's part of what we do at Don't Miss a Beat.
Yeah, so I was trying to get into and everything like that when I was reading about your I don't know what to call it. And it's not a charity, is it? Or just
It's it's
It
cool.
is?
It's a nonprofit organization.
okay, nonprofit
Yeah.
organization. Sorry, I didn't
Yeah.
want to say the wrong
No,
thing.
no.
But yeah, that's what I was getting into. I just think that's so cool because like that's how I got into music. Was literally like I was learning how to play hot cross buns on the recorder, and I was like, oh, I can do this a lot faster than everybody else for some reason.
Right.
So I'm gonna stick with this. I like doing it. It makes me happy.
Nurture people's propensity to do
Yeah.
a certain thing rather than force them into a field that they don't want to be in. You have a much happier society that way, I think.
But I guess but what's your program about or organization? Sorry.
Sure. So it's Don't Miss a Beat, and we basically are an organization, and we're not far from here. We're on West Beaver Street. We have two locations: West Beaver Street and Jackson Street. And basically, we're after school tutoring. So our kids come to us. We make sure they're cool with academically. We have tutors, and it's all free. And then the artistic component is that we're now focused on musical theater. We used to do like band and all that, but we found that we were really making greater strides with kids with musical theater. So kids get, arts activity after they get their homework done. We make sure they eat and all that stuff. And a big part of our flagship program is our summer camp. So we now actually call it a Broadway summer camp. So kids come to us 6 weeks, they take classes, and we mount a Broadway show at the end of it.
That's awesome.
And it's amazing, man. I mean, we're almost 15 years old now.
That's awesome.
What'd you do last summer?
We did In the Heights.
Okay.
Which was funny because it was actually not, because I planned the musicals. I picked them. So I'll say this. So I picked them because I want my kids to gain musical theater credits. So I started picking Broadway junior productions about 4 or 5 years ago, so that when my kids graduate high school and most of them want to go to college and get a scholarship, they have this list of credits. So I picked In the Heights like 6 to 8 months before the summer, and then the movie ended up coming out last summer. So it ended up being like perfect timing. But yeah, that's another part of our program as well, is that every kid comes to us, they become part of a great school, and then they get through high school and they go to college. That is a big part of us, and it kind of distinguishes us from some of the other great nonprofits here that are more interested in like just a kid like while they're in school. Our thing is, we have kids from ages 5 all the way up to 16, 17. I mean, even when they graduate high school and go to college, they come back and, intern at camp or work with us. So, we're really about our mission statement, which basically says the arts are the bridge to a better life. So we believe by introducing kids to the arts, even if they don't become this, uber talented, whatever, having that still helps them to develop in a way that not having it would.
Right. Or you can just set them up for a life of being broke and depressed.
Yeah, again, another podcast.
No, I'm just saying. That's so cool, man.
Yeah,
That's
it's
just
awesome.
just so awesome.
So I always say it's my life's work, and being an artistic director changes how I do everything. Because as as musicians, you kind of have this mentality of like, all right, show up, do the gig, and it's a thing. But when you like have a business and what you do reflects the children in that business, it makes you move differently.
So this is a perfect transition because
Yes.
I really want to get into the entrepreneurial stuff. So I'm really big on this idea that your creativity can take you beyond like your music, you know. So when did that idea become apparent to you?
So early on, I always say that I've been entrepreneurial, I think, intentionally since I was 16.
Okay.
So when I was in Jacksonville, as I said, I was playing with all these musicians, and I put together my first band full of a bunch of DA cats, and it was called Quick Changes Quintet. And it was called Quick Changes because nobody could ever do the same gigs, so it was always interchangeable members, right?
That's hilarious.
So I went to Barnes and Noble on Atlantic Boulevard, because we all were trying to save money to buy CDs, because we were trying to build up our jazz record collection so we could know this music. So I was like, man, how could I like get CDs but not have to pay money? So Barnes and Noble had an incredible CD collection. So I was like, well, what if I go to them, ask them to let me play, and then they'll give me like, money or whatever. So I went and they were like, well, we can't pay you money, but we can give you gift certificates. I was like, well, great. So, and Starbucks they had just put a Starbucks in there.
Nice.
So they're like, you and your band, y'all play for 3 hours, 6 to 8, whatever it was. You get as much Starbucks coffee as you want, and you get gift certificates. So it was killing. So that was like my first gig. Then the Loop Bar and Pizza Grill or whatever in San Marco, that used to be called Tavern on the Square. It was a kind of a sort of dive bar restaurant. And so they had jazz there. And another guy who I got to give a shout out to, who's been playing music in Jacksonville and doing unbelievable stuff, is a guy named Lawrence Buckner.
Oh yeah, played a couple gigs with him. He's amazing. Man.
Yeah, Lawrence is great. He's a treasure. He should be one of the things I hope to do. I'm always plugging stuff. I want to be able to be in charge or at least contribute to that, like Jacksonville Hall of Fame. And there's a lot of musicians here that should be part of that, like him, Eric Carter, Barry Green. Anyway, Lawrence ran a session at Tavern on the Square, and he got busy, and he's like, yo, you want to do it? And so I started running my own jam session. So, man, at 16, I was running my own jam session, had a gig at Barnes & Noble, was at DA, had a church gig, and with Claude and Eric Green, we were doing all these gigs down in Amelia Island.
Claude Bassingworth.
Yeah.
Bassing 3.
He's
The pipe
great,
tobacconist.
I've known him for a long time too.
Claude
Jazz
is
is stupid.
Yeah.
That's his whole thing, right?
I love Claude, man. He was deep, man. I have a lot of love for him. So anyway, yeah. So I think I started becoming entrepreneurial because I fell in love with not only just getting better, but like creating new opportunities for music. And then when I moved to New York, I wasn't really trying to be entrepreneurial. At that point, probably my first 6 or 7 years, I was just surviving.
Yeah,
just
totally.
trying to like play. And then I think when I graduated college, I always say I graduated, walk across the stage, 2006, I had a panic attack. I was like, what the hell am I going to do with this degree? I'm like, what am I, And so I went home and I started journaling about all the stuff I learned in my music business courses and all the stuff I didn't learn. And so I started writing this journal, and that is actually what my book, The Musician's Career Guide, is. It's about 15 years worth of notes.
That's awesome.
Of everything that I wish I had been taught and then things that I was learning. But yeah, the idea of entrepreneurship to me, I always say the textbook definition is a person who, forms a business by taking on greater than normal financial risk. I mean, so basically if you start a business and you're taking a risk to do so, that's entrepreneurial. And I feel like artists by nature are entrepreneurial. I mean, what you guys are doing here is an incredible entrepreneurial endeavor, right? Because there's sacrifice, there's risk. So I started understanding that entrepreneurship wasn't this thing that like tech billionaires did. Even as creative artists, we are all doing that.
Right.
And so just finding ways to maximize that.
So I'm curious, why do you do you find that a lot of musicians like taking your craft seriously, or like the pursuit of your craft seriously? Do you find that that's taboo amongst musicians? And why do you think that is, if you do find it taboo?
I don't think that. I mean, even like here in Jacksonville, which isn't considered an aggressive musical like scene, I meet musicians every day, whether they play rock or funk or whatever, and they are serious about their craft. They may not have it as a full-time job. They may not, make a full living from it, but like they play every weekend or they do whatever. So I don't buy into the like musicians don't take themselves seriously. But I don't think musicians understand how to maximize what they do.
Right.
Like I have a lot of friends here who like they are incredible artists, but they have a day job. And I'm like, if you took that time, maybe a month off from your day job and like added that time and energy to what you did, that could make you more money than you would ever make on your day job.
Totally.
So what I find here in town are people who are afraid to take risk and bet on themselves. And I will say, like, out of any, if people don't remember anything that I say in this podcast, remember this: don't be afraid to bet on yourself, because that to me is the tool or the key entity in being an entrepreneur, is the ability to not only take risk but to bet on yourself.
Totally.
And if you bet on yourself enough and you produce, then that it just keeps repeating itself.
So
It's so funny that you say it. Like literally, he says this all the time, and I just make fun of him, like for saying this. Not that he's he's wrong or anything like that, but it's just like you're just saying it like literally here. I'm like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Okay, I get it.
You're like, okay.
I get it. I get it now. That's fine. I get it.
You're like, next question.
No, it's all right.
it's that's why I say things like that sometimes. You meet a lot of
Intervention
people.
to quit my day job. Apparently.
It's an intervention.
Quit.
Yeah, I feel like I've met a lot of people in the music industry, or just more as being a musician, that don't take themselves seriously, or that think that because you do take yourself seriously, like they don't take you seriously, type thing.
I mean, the other thing is you can't worry about what other people think about you.
Right.
I mean, I started calling myself an entrepreneur before people believed it. I mean, everything you see or read on that resume or bio is stuff that I dreamed up, and I kept believing it, and I kept saying it until everybody started saying it.
Right.
Like that, like the fact that you're sitting here being like, man, I really want to talk about entrepreneurship with you is hilarious to me.
Yeah.
Because I remember when I would say it, no, seriously, because I would say it, I'd be like, yeah, I'm an entrepreneur, and people would be like, whatever. Now people are like, so creative entrepreneur, Ulysses Owens, and I'm like, yeah, I built that shit. So I say that to say like, cause I would be in my bedroom and be like, I'm going to be a creative entrepreneur. My dad's like, a what? Okay, can you pay the rent this month?
Yeah.
But that's the beauty of it. And now like I am that,
Right.
So I think you have to have a vision of what you want to become, and you have to be so hard pressed about it. That's why like, I can't speak to all the other stuff that Kanye
That's exactly who I was thinking about. As soon as
I
he said
can't
that,
speak
because
to
he did
that.
the same
but
thing.
but I tell, if you are an entrepreneur or you desire to be an entrepreneur, you have to watch that documentary, or
100%.
particularly the first episode.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because like what was so deep to me, I saw so much of myself in him, in that here was a guy who wanted something and could see it and could feel it, and it wasn't happening.
Yes.
But he didn't stop like wanting it or feeling it. And what was crazy to me was like now he could like pee in a corner and it's going to be all over the news.
Yeah.
So like this
Turn that
guy,
into a gold record.
right? Like this guy is so relentless that like he became what he wanted to become. But it was so great to see how people kind of thought he was a joke.
Yeah.
And now there's not a day goes by that his name is not mentioned in some kind of mainstream media.
Right.
So I say that to say like I think that's where the belief in the entrepreneurial like thing is really rich, and that you have to believe it when nobody else believes it.
Did you ever let that kind of, I guess, dismissiveness towards your mindset, did it ever like create any self-doubt in you at all? Or did you always just like, even if you were failing or getting rejected, you always knew that you were on the right path?
Well, I'll tell you, the times that I doubted the journey is when there's moments of great loss, right? So like the pandemic, we all lost a lot, right? We lost a lot of money, we lost people, we lost things. So there were different moments where I was like, do I need to like pivot? Which the answer was yes, but I didn't need to pivot away from what I was doing. I needed to go deeper into another direction.
Right.
So there are moments, or where you go after opportunities and you're like, oh, okay, if I get, if I do this, and then I get that, then I'll get here. And when you get to here and that doesn't happen, you're like, what? So I had to start learning, like, be open to like how you're gonna get where you're gonna get to. So you may go here, and then like come at it from another angle. So I stopped. Like now I'm getting to a point where I don't worry about getting there. My question for myself is always, what's the journey and what is God always trying to teach me? I now understand this, and I do not mean to come across arrogant. But I will say this, I'm at a place now in my faith in God and in myself, nothing is going to stop what I want. So I tell people all the time, you can stand in my way if you want, but you're going to get run over.
Yeah.
So you can either hold hands with me or you can get run over.
I
That's where I'm at now.
I love that mentality.
And
man.
what I mean is not, and I don't mean it from a like, what I want from a selfish, arrogant, like what I want, like spoiled kid. No, meaning like when I'm tuned in and tapped into purpose and God's purpose, then nothing can block what the universe and what God wants for you to have.
Right.
So in that regard, I'm like, you either need to be a part of this. It's like you guys, right? You have this incredible podcast that's going to turn into something.
So incredible.
That's going to turn into something even more incredible.
Right.
And nobody's going to stop that. They can maybe delay it, but nothing's going to stop that if you keep going. The only thing that can stop you is if you stop.
it's the biggest obstacle is yourself, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
it.
read Joshua, dude.
This
This is Walls
Sorry,
of Jericho, dude.
I've
Calm
been in
down.
church
Hey, man.
like twice in my life.
Gotta just
Sorry.
keep going. Even if it's in a circle for 7 days at a time. Whatever, just keep going.
It's true. And most stuff, if you look at your life, most of the things that don't happen is because you stopped.
Right. Right. No, that's so true, man. You know, another documentary to watch in the same vein as that Kanye one is the one with Kevin Hart. I can't remember what it's called right now, but it's basically about him like trying to like he's working on like different things.
Oh, nice.
And he talks about his grind coming up, doing
Yeah.
stand-up comedy, and then he kind of goes into when he started producing Soul Plane and putting that
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
Because like, people act like when I was doing Soul Plane, like I had money. He was like, I was broke.
Yeah.
He was like, after Soul Plane came
Yeah.
out, I was broke.
Yeah.
Don't fuck this
Don't
up.
fuck this up. That's
Yeah,
what
I
it's called.
gotta go. Oh, I did watch that. Yeah.
Bro, it's so good.
Yeah.
Like, I watched it at the time where I needed to watch it, kind of like
Yeah.
the Kanye one too, where it's like
Yeah.
you're having these doubts in your head, and you watch that, and you're like, Kevin Hart, and he still get like at his level, like he's in meetings, he's still getting rejected by people.
Oh, absolutely.
Like-
That's what, and people don't understand that. Like, I always say, like, what you go through on one level, it continues on other levels. It's just with different things.
Right.
I mean, I can't tell you how many times I hear no to this day.
That's amazing.
Like I still, you know, my manager and I now, like the big thing we're trying to work on now is me having more band leading opportunities. And because people are like, oh, well, we love you as a drummer and we want you to do this for someone else. But then when you present your project, they're like, oh, we don't know. So that's the battle we're fighting with some people now, or, you know, fighting the battle of record companies. You know, I get called by pretty much every major, you know, jazz record company to produce or to play on someone's record. But when it comes to them signing me, they, you know, they're like, oh, we don't know if he can sell records, but you've used my name to sell everybody else's record.
Right. It's the same thing Kanye was going through.
Yeah,
with
so
production
it's
stuff.
and that's why his thing resonated so well with me, because he wanted to be more than what people wanted him to be.
Right.
You know, he wanted to continue to be all the stuff that they wanted, but he had this other thing. And you know, even when you're successful, people get stuck with the kind of success you have, and they kind of want to like lock you into that.
Totally.
So
yeah.
you just have to shake it up.
Isn't that a weird thing? Like, it's kind of like the modern day, like musicians and artists in general, kind of like the modern day court jesters, where it's like, yeah, you can achieve fame and power and financial stability and all that stuff, but at the end of the day, people always look at you as their property in some way.
Yeah.
It's like whatever you're producing means that much to me. We want you to keep doing that. And the second you stop is the second we stop respecting you,
But-
and then your entire career can crumble.
But
you
here's
know?
the other thing: if you stay locked into their stuff or their idea of you, then you get trapped by that.
Right.
And then you have the situation where, you know, those that are like, oh, well, I'd rather have this day job, and they work this day job for 20 years, and great, you got your pension, you got your, you know, benefits, all of that, but then that's all you have.
Right.
You don't have all these other things that you could have had.
Right.
And so I'm one of those people. I'd rather get to the end of the line and say I tried everything, and what I have as a result of trying everything, versus getting to the end of the line and committing to this one thing that was safe.
Right.
I'm totally not into playing it safe.
I hear that 100%, man. I'm with you.
But it's not easy, right?
Playing
I mean, but it's
safe,
also, but hey, but
pretty
It's
straightforward.
rewarding.
but it's also not. It's also not easy doing the same thing over and over again.
Tell me about
Right.
it.
I mean, it's like I won't tell you what the situation was, but I had a very great counselor who said to me one time. She said, "Ulysses, it's going to be very difficult if you stay in this situation, and it's going to be very difficult if you leave this situation. You have to choose your difficulty." So it's like you have to choose which because both are difficult. And she was right. Both scenarios were difficult. I chose the one that was the level of difficulty that I wanted. But here's what I did. I chose the one that eventually was going to get me to the other side.
Right.
And so I think that's where you have to say, okay, is me doing this thing, like, you know, keeping this job, is that going to lead me to a kind of comfort that I'm okay with?
Right.
So and nobody can choose that for you but you.
And that's the betting on yourself thing, right? That's essentially saying, like, if I take this direction, it's going to be a lot less stable and the outcome's not as clear. But do I believe that I can make that happen for myself? Versus, do I believe that somebody else is going to do that better for me, right? And that's the whole thing.
Yep.
So-
I mean, I'm with you, man. I mean, this one quote someone told me years ago, it was like, you can either fight to make your dreams happen, or you could spend your life making somebody else's dreams happen.
Exactly.
And I personally want my dreams to happen because my dreams are linked to so many other people that I love and care about that I want to provide for. So I don't really have time to build someone else's thing.
Right.
Now I'm happy to help build something in a way that helps me build too.
Sure.
But I don't have the time to help build somebody else's.
Right, right. So I'm curious, what were like your earliest pursuits like? I mean, outside of like running jams and like doing gigs, like what outside of music, what were your entrepreneurial
I mean,
pursuits?
so I had a record company at one point.
Really?
Yeah, it was called Sound on Purpose Records.
Sound on Purpose Records.
Yeah, it was. I produced maybe five or six artists. So I had a record company for like a year, and then I realized that I infrastructurally knew how to have it, but I didn't have the capital. So that was something I had. I was a jazz curator for a really major club in New York City. So I had a company called Unanimous Music, which basically booked over at that, I think towards the end of it, we booked over like 300 or something artists for the series. So I was sort of like a booking agent and curator. I had an online business. Actually, sort of during the pandemic, I was trying to create kind of like an online lesson portal where I could sort of have people come to me and sort of build things that they wanted to build. Sort of like I teach you music entrepreneurship. I've written, I have books. I've had my own private lesson studio. I've had my own music products. I've had signature products with other companies. My production company is probably the one thing that has been consistent. I've had that for over 10 years.
So you're producing artists with that?
Yeah,
Okay.
UOJ Productions. So I produce artists with that. And so probably to this date, we've produced over like 40 or so independent records. Mainly jazz, but we've done some singer-songwriter, some other things.
Now, are you acting as a label, or are you putting it like distributing through a certain company, or is it just?
So when I produce, my goal is I just produce the album, and then I help the artist decide if they're gonna either work with a label or if they're gonna like license it or just release it on their own. So I consult with all that.
So is the album typically done by the time you go and seek a label, or is?
Yeah, well, so it's a couple different ways. I've had artists who were like being courted by other labels. So I've done projects where like I'll produce a couple things and send it to the label, and they're like, oh, well, we like them, but they need to finish this record and then come to us.
Okay.
So I've done that. And that's kind of more traditional, where I've just worked with a lot of artists where we just produce their record and maybe they partner with a label later. I've also had a company in New York. That's probably the longest thing where I provide music for private events. So I have clients like, especially now it's been really great. I have clients like Facebook and Penn Literary, Carnegie Hall, like a lot of people where like they're like, hey, Ulysses, we have this event going on and we want you to, provide a group, because at first it was like me showing up, and then they'd be like, well, we have an event, but we kind of like don't want drums. I hope you don't get offended. I'm like, I'm not offended. Like, what do you want? And they're like, oh, well, we want a guitar duo. And I call up a friend of mine, hey, can you all do it? And we make it happen. So that was something I've been doing that for, like I said, almost 20 years. So again, it's just that it's, having those multiple streams of income, because sometimes those things will like sustain you when other stuff doesn't work out.
Right.
And that's been my thing, is just being on the grind, man. Just like trying to make stuff happen.
So when you talk about diversifying revenue streams, there's got to be like a good way to do that and then a bad way to do that, right?
I don't believe in good and bad ways to diversify your income. I think that there's what you need and then there's what you want, right? Like, so my main source of income before the pandemic was my career as a drummer. So 90% of my income was me going somewhere and sitting on a set of drums and getting a check at the end of the night.
Right.
And then it started changing where it was like 80%. And then I started getting educational opportunities, like when I started teaching at Julliard, where they're like, well, we need you to be here pretty consistently for 9 months out of the year. So then it was like 80-20. Then it was keep doing that, but then I want you to produce, 10 records this year. So then it's like, well, I can't be on the road as much and do this and really be involved with these artists. So now it's like 70-30, So that's why I say like the idea of it being a good or bad way, I think it's more organic than that. I think you have to decide what you're interested in. So now it's like, okay, I have Julliard. Now I'm like on the road maybe 30%,
Right.
Don't Miss a Beat, my family's company, production. Now I'm getting called to do all these like speaking events. Now I'm an author. I have a book. So I have, certain things that economically help me around that. So now it's like 5 or 6 different things that I'm invested in, but it started out with just me playing drums and then taking a gig on the side.
Right.
So I think it's more about like if you do other things well, like for you, it may be like you play gigs, but you also have this cool podcast. Then it may be somebody sees this podcast like, man, I like what you guys did. Can you help me with mine?
Yep.
So now it's you playing gigs, doing your podcast, and now somebody else is paying you all to help with theirs.
So happy you said all that.
Yeah.
So shout out.
So do you feel like because in my mind it seems like if you want to diversify, the best way to do it would be to start something or get involved in something that has one hand feed the other type thing, right? Like if you like invest your time into being an artist, then to invest your time into something else that, let's say, like, I don't know, like a lawn service, right? Maybe that's not the best way to do it because that might not enable your ability to be an artist in the same way that like investing in another endeavor that might be more conducive to being an artist. Does that make sense?
Here's what I say. Be an expert at something first.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. It's like that's not your expertise, is mowing lawns. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, how's that going to help you in any way?
Like my whole thing, mastery is still, I feel like mastery is still necessary and it's still popular. So that's why I keep going back to my career as a drummer. Like that's something, and I don't mean like I've mastered it, but meaning like I have expertise as a drummer. Like it's something I've been doing since I was 2 years old. I've had a certain level of success, so that is an area that I have mastery in. I have a degree that says I have mastery. So like that is something that I'm an expert in. Because people, and this is how you diversify, or another term I like to use is leverage. Because people trust me as a drummer, how do I get them to trust me at other things?
Right.
So because they trust that I can play the drums and play the music the way they want me to play, the other question is, will you then trust me to produce it? Right? So it's you leverage one thing against another versus this new age where everybody's like trying to do 20 things at the same time. Well, do you do one thing well? So for me, like, leverage has been my key of, okay, so I play well. Now people trust me to like lead. Then they trust me to produce. Because I produced, and they trust me to put music in a venue. Because they trust me to put music in a venue, they now trust me to manage a venue. Because they trust me to manage a venue, they now trust me to manage a tour. So it's like you build off of these things, but you have to build off of it from a level of like being a master or being very good at that.
Right.
And I think if you can prove that, which is why I use you being a great musician, which parlays into your ability to do this podcast. From you doing this podcast can break into you maybe managing some other thing, or maybe going to, a news station and saying, hey, we'll manage that. And so, but the other thing people have to realize, you have to still keep those other things.
Exactly.
Juggle all of it.
That's when the power of a team comes in.
Yep.
Is that you can't then like my sister, shout out Felicia Bass, who's probably texting me because I know I have to go to this other thing. But she is an incredible or great photographer, but she's now really getting more serious about it and building her business. And so as a family and as a family business, we are rallying around her saying, let's use the relationships that you already have, that people trust her, because she's incredible at what she does as a logistics, and she's our director of operations. And as part of that, she's been a photographer. So like with that, like use those same relationships. And it was easy for her because people were like, oh yeah, like I remember you took that picture and it was on Don't Miss a Beat's website and I love that. So now they want her to take pictures of their family event. You know what I mean? So I really, instead of the idea of like multiple streams of income, leverage. Like to me, leverage, because it goes back to what do you already have,
right?
And how can you build upon what you already have?
100%.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, 100%, man, 100%. Cool. That kind of answers like the next 5 questions that I have. So.
I feel like I'm at like a Tony Robbins motivational speak-a-thon right now, but it's awesome, man. I'm just listening. I'm like, just tell me more secrets, please. Yeah, it's free. This is great.
For free.
Yeah.
No, man. I mean, it's. I love the way that you think about all this stuff, man. It's
also, I can't wait to just like have a picture of us, and then it just says like in quotations, "Cool, incredible." Ulysses Owens Jr. That's what he said. The critics all agree.
Right. One day they will.
So I'm curious. We live in the age of social media now. So what role has that played in your ability to be sustainable?
I love social media.
Okay.
But I love it because I stay in my lane.
Yeah.
A big part of my, social media creed is that I don't engage in the personal, political rhetoric.
Of course.
Whatever my political views, I share them with my family and with the people that are closest to me. Because here's the thing, you may like my drumming, but you may not like my political views. And so why am I going to ruin you wanting to pick up my book or pick up an album that helps you to love what I do more because I tell you who I agree with or don't agree with politically. So social media for me is great because I get to promote what I want to promote. The other thing about social media, people don't understand the gift that it is. 20 years ago or in the 80s or 90s, anything you wanted as an artist, a label had to give you access to it.
Right.
And if a label dropped you, you no longer had access to that.
Right.
So they had access to your PR, they had access to your tour dates, your tour support. They had access to your mailing list.
All your distribution.
They controlled every relationship. With social media, you own all those relationships.
Yeah.
So if you have, 1,000 followers, those 1,000 people belong to you. And unless you do something crazy to ruin that, you have those 1,000 people for the rest of your life. That's something that the artist has never, ever, 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 ever had. Which is why you had like an 80s artist who was like, where are they now? Because once they fell out of grace with the label, they no longer had access to all that stuff they built. The label just took that and they gave it to another artist.
Exactly.
So social media for me, is important and it's a big part of my success because it gives me the place to build my audience and also give them what I want. So like even now, if I'm like, man, I think I want to record a new record, I could just start talking about it on social media. And now in 3 weeks, I've got all my followers aware of what I'm doing. Versus before, you'd have to be like, all right, I'm going to do another record. Do we have 10 grand to hire a PR person?
Yeah, that's still a case for us.
But you have to do it you have to use your resources.
Yeah, 100%.
And that's where the idea of followers gets tricky, right? Because they're like, oh, well, it's easy for you to say you have so many followers. I always say to people used to joke about how bad my Instagram page was.
Yeah.
My friends who had more followers they would clown me. And I actually would say to them, well, why is it so bad? And they'd be like, well, because you do this and you do that. And you do that. I'm like, well, tell me more. Well, you could do this. And, oh, man, that one post, that was so horrible. And I took everything that everybody told me and I reversed it. And now I have more followers than all of them combined. So I say that to say, like, you have to look like, you have to analyze, like, how can you be better and, like, how can you use what you have? So instead of getting mad or dark about it, I was like, well, tell me how I can do whatever. And basically it was a couple things. It was the quality of my content.
Yeah.
It was the quality of my photos. It was the quality of my videos. I wasn't posting a lot of video content. And I was also being something that I wasn't. I was trying to be like what I thought people wanted Ulysses to be instead of who I actually was. And my social media following, it grew because when I was honest about who I was and authentic about who I was, then people are like, oh, I'm interested in that. So like now I post pictures of my like son and I'm like, he's so juicy and chubby and, slob, rolling down. And people are like, oh my God, I love that. And like baby companies hit me up like, can we use your son for a promo? I'm just showing my like juicy, chubby son.
Really?
Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, so and he didn't even know what the hell's going on. He's trying to eat the camera.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But there's something authentic about that. Or like sometimes I'll get on and I'll be like, man, I'm in the shed and like I look really awkward when I practice and I post it and people are like, I look awkward like that too.
Yeah.
So I find that social media is this great place if you're authentic, and most of us that are trying to find our way on it, I think we have to just be more organic and then we have to engage, with people. So anyway, but yeah, social media, I don't think the opportunities I have now would be there if I didn't have social media.
Yeah, so I was gonna say, like, have you been able to leverage your following on there to work in like brand partnerships and that kind of thing?
Everything I have, for the most part, is because of social media.
That's awesome.
Even like the reason why I'm here, right? I got here because David from shout out to Manifest Distilling. So I had a jam session here during the pandemic, right up the street at Wildcrafters.
Yeah,
another shout out.
Yeah.
Young, which is my main man. Anyway, so I had it, and I said to Young, I was like, yo, we about to go hard on social media. And I just started posting clips of what we did at Wildcrafters, and it got to the point where it was one of the most popular events in Jacksonville. Well, David heard about that and was like, man, how can we work together? He and I started working together at Manifest. I was coming by to check out the band that night, and I ran into you. Right. So social media is the gift that keeps giving. I would not have gotten to David had we not made such a big thing about what Young and I were doing. And he heard about it and was like, man, how can we be part of that and get, access to some of what you're trying to do artistically in Jacksonville.
Right.
So again, it goes back to social media.
It's funny that it's the same thing with like in my perspective too, where I talked to David and I was like, hey, we have a podcast.
Right.
We're on social media. All that stuff. Would you guys be interested in like working with us? And he was like, yeah, you should get that guy on your podcast. And I was like, trust me, I would love to get Ulysses on the podcast. He was like, I'll go introduce you. And then that's how it worked. So it's like, again, social media being that leverage thing.
But the other thing, and I'm going to give out some free advice with social media, and this is key. If one person uses this the right way, it will change their career.
Listen up, Bill.
The thing about social media is that you need to capture what you're actually doing in real time to build what you're doing. So for instance, if I, like on your podcast, I would have had somebody doing B-roll as I was coming in.
Shit.
Right?
We're slipping, guys.
No, and we would if we could have any other camera. I think we're using every pan in the cover, dude.
But use your
phone.
camera.
Yeah, just use your phone.
Use your camera. No, but I'm saying why. So while you're
Don't
doing
argue
it,
the man, Bill.
I'm just saying why you're doing it.
I'm just kidding.
Like so as I'm
right
coming.
there.
So as I'm coming in, it's like, oh, you is in the building, whatever, and then you tag me, I tag you, and then I also do. So now you got your following and my following captivated during this moment.
Right.
And the mistake we make a lot of times is we finish this, we put together these beautiful, cute little reels, and then we try to get engagement after the moment has happened. And what I think social media is key with is it gets people engaged. So if somebody's like at work right now, like, BSing or whatever, and they're like on your page, they're like, oh, dang, that's happening now. And so you've got their attention now. And so that to me is a big part of what makes social media amazing is the fact that, like, I'm at work, and I like Kanye, and if I decide to log onto his live, I could see what he's doing right now.
Right.
And that is the other piece, the people that I see do really well. Like somebody I follow on social media that I'm not a fan of his music, but I love his social media is DJ Khaled.
Oh, yeah, Khaled, yeah.
Man, like he literally posted a video one day of him eating an ice cream sandwich.
Yeah, he's a fat guy.
Yeah, he's like, yo, man, bless up. Like y'all, we making money.
Yeah.
But it was like
funny.
3 million views.
Yeah.
Because that's his authentic space.
Yeah.
So for me, I feel like that's where a lot of us miss out is we try to treat social media kind of like the website thing and not realizing like that's the greatest marketing tool you'll ever have.
Right.
It's so simple too. I don't know how we skipped over that one.
Well, we've talked about doing IG lives and stuff like
Oh
that.
no,
for
that's
stuff on
somebody. But like the behind the scene things, and like
Yeah.
it's about to happen.
Yeah.
But that's what people. I mean,
No, I get it.
Yeah,
That's awesome. I mean, it's awesome. idea.
that's what people want.
Yeah,
you
totally.
know, that's what they want. So, I can take a few more questions.
Yeah, no, for sure. Dude. So that was actually basically like the last of it. I just kind of want to know like what you're listening to these days. Do you listen to music at all?
Oh heck yeah!
Like, just listen to it.
Yeah, I mean, I like Spotify. I mean, don't kill me. I like Spotify philosophically from the place of how you get access to so much music.
Yeah, totally.
And what I love the most about it is the playlist.
Yeah.
I've gotten exposed to so much new music by like just, so cool thing I love about Spotify is I could literally get in my car now and be like driving down the highway vibes. And there's a playlist
Right.
like for that mood that I'm in. And then all of a sudden, like, I get introduced to like 100 new artists I've never ever heard of. So yeah, so with that said, there's a great jazz artist, Cecile McLaurin Salvant. She just released an album, I think it's called Ghost Stories. So I was listening to that. I'm checking that out. Yeah, who else? Somebody else released an album. Yeah, I'm always listening to a bunch of stuff.
Are you listening to like predominantly like jazz stuff, or are you just whatever's?
I mean, I like jazz, and I like and I love it, but because I do it for a living, sometimes the more I'm on the road, the less of jazz I listen to.
Sure.
During the pandemic, I actually listened to a pile of jazz because I was missing it so much.
Right.
Now I just like to listen to things that I can keep creating with. Like actually, there's a playlist on Spotify I love. It's called Deep Focus.
Okay.
And it's like real ethereal, like sound wave stuff. And I love it. And it allows me to write and do all the stuff I'm doing and listen to it. Because sometimes when I'm listening to stuff with lyrics and, and because I'm a musician, those sensory things start going off.
Totally.
So I typically like to listen more to like softer, chill stuff. I love Brazilian music, singer-songwriter stuff that's kind of like more thought provoking and allows me to like settle in and like check out other stuff. So.
Yeah, like
Totally.
deep German minimal house.
Yeah.
100%.
Afro Tribe.
Yes.
You know?
That's Billy's shit right
That's
there,
my
bro.
shit. Yeah, absolutely. When the lyrics are on or anything like that, or if anything crazy is going on, I can't focus on anything.
Yeah.
So it's hard, you know.
Ulysses, thanks so much for being here today, man. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I
man.
want to give some advice before I leave.
More advice. No, I'm just messing around.
I'm a key guy. Like I'm very big into like 3, 4, 5 keys, whatever. For everybody who's watching this or checking this out, whatever stage you're in, first you need to be honest about like where you are constantly. Be honest about where you are. Then second, be honest about where you want to go. And then third, be honest about who can help you get there. Many of us watch billions of podcasts every day, but we don't think about, okay, I'm not the only person that's going to make this possible.
Right.
And then I would say, fourth, leverage. Understand the idea of leverage. And then 5, go for it. Go for it, whatever it is. And even if you fail, you will actually learn more from a failure than you will from winning.
Totally.
So yeah, just go for it. And yeah, man. And divorce the idea of how you think it should happen. Just say like, I really want like this. You really want your podcast to grow, but be less concerned with how it grows and more concerned with like we're gonna grow this and we're gonna try a bunch of stuff and we're gonna figure it out. And then you'll get to where you want to get to.
Totally. We really appreciate all the advice, man. I really appreciate you being here.
Yeah,
so
thank you.
much
Yeah,
knowledge
absolutely.
just dropping.
We'll do a part 2, I promise, and I won't be late.
Bro, no, we won't be late. We got
That's fine.
Appreciate you guys, man.
All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. It's been a pleasure, and we will see you guys next time.
Adios, muchachos.
Thank you, man.